I don't get much quacks that have the lack of intelligence enough to actually debate with me because, it's kind of incomprehensible to debate for, mutilating the genitals of anyone, any human being, male, female, intersex, trans, whatever. The idea of arguing for the genital mutilation of anyone is just absolutely ridiculous. It's as utterly ridiculous to argue for the genital mutilation of females or males as it is to argue for the genital mutilation of females. It's just ridiculous. And then the level of denial is wow. It's fascinating the level of denial these men will go through, the mental gymnastics. This guy, like I've provided the highest quality studies, numerous studies, histology studies, neurological testing, and this guy he won't even wrap his brain around the fact that my science far out trumps his science. And I tried to find the comment where he gave me the link to Brian Morris's quack paper where he says that there is no loss of sensory function from mutilating the main sensory tissue, which is crazy. So anyways, if you've been in Intactivism long enough, you know the name Brian Morris. I actually found out who this was very early in my Intactivism career when I brought this to my family, and my sister did her little Google search, and she wanted to cover her CYA, and so she found this ridiculous website. She said, "Oh, there's men on here that say that there's no loss in sensory function, and it's the best thing since sliced bread." And there's all these, and I went to this website and I started reading it, and I was just like, "This is wow, this is crazy! Like this is some weird stuff." And that's when I started to do my research on this Brian Morris character. And you're going to find out some things about him. But before we get into that, I'm just going to read some comments from the quack so you guys can see just how outrageous the claims of this quack are. I mean, he straight up denies anything that I've provided. I've provided tons of evidence. I've studied this for 14 years. I know more about this than 90% of the quacks, 99% of the quacks on this entire planet. I've read 8 books on this. I've studied this for years, and I've talked to thousands of men who have had circumcisions as adults. I've talked to tons of people, and there's no question that the facts of human anatomy don't change to appease somebody's ego like this ridiculous quack. And there's facts that sensory nerves feel. If you find sensory nerves in abundance, there's a reason why they're there. That's not a correlation equals causation type of situation. That's a anatomy determines function kind of situation. So your knee works as a hinge joint. That's not a correlation to running. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy that this guy even thinks that. But anyways, let's just read how outrageous this doctor is. And this is you really can highlight how utterly brainwashed and delusional and outside of common sense and reality these quacks can literally get to. It's mind-boggling. But more so is the horrible nature of the quacks that are involved in this, that this is a violent sexual abuse and assault of a child, and that the quacks that do this will lie through their teeth. They have ulterior motives. They have a conflict of interest, right? And if you have a very strong sexual desire for certain things, and you oftentimes will make ridiculous lies for those types of things, these types of people that don't have, normal human emotions like empathy and instincts for protecting children. But anyways, let's get into this. I'm going to read through this real quick. One claims, literally no one claims there aren't nerves. Histology studies cannot provide anything besides a correlation. I mean, it's literally the study of tissue. If you look at the study of tissue and you say, well, there's a hair follicle. Well, that hair follicle helps to preserve heat, right? And it also has a sensory input. That's not like correlation, okay? That's like looking at the histology study and then understanding the function of the tissue. You can basically infer the function if you understand the histology of the tissue. So this guy's literally in denial of histology. I've already talked about this, but let's just go into more of what he says. Why would I video debate someone who can't provide evidence? I provided tons of evidence. The guy just can't acknowledge its evidence. It's a cognitive dissonance. Like he can't wrap his brain around the fact that my studies are far superior to him, and that's what this whole video is about. Anyways, having a sensory nerve only shows a correlation to sexual sensitivity and pleasure. Correlation? No, it's actually how it occurs. Like there is no other way that it occurs. It doesn't occur, like I mentioned before, through your blood vessels or through your hair. It literally occurs through nerves, right? And nerves are found in the prepuce. So any lack of those nerves or reduction of those nerves is a reduction in sensation. A reduction in sensation of a sense organ that provides pleasure would mean that you have a reduction in that pleasure. It's just simple math. But anyways, we've already talked about that enough. I just want to get further into the details of this quack. All those books, not one single scientific study supporting you. So sad. I mean, it's just like if you just claim something over and over and over again, you repeat it over and over and over again, it somehow becomes true in stupid brains. But I'm not that stupid, so I don't know why you're trying that technique with me. It's really not going to work, Dr. Smooth Brain. Even if the foreskin played a role, it still wouldn't be the main sensory tissue. That would be the glands. The glands is the least, and it's not glands with a D, it's glands, G-A-L-A-N-S. The guy doesn't even know the spelling, and he's a doctor. I mean, he doesn't even know the spelling of the part he's talking about. It's embarrassing for him. Also, I do love how you seem to know more than actual doctors and experts who all agree that the foreskin doesn't play a significant role. I do know more than most of the doctors. I do. And that's called studying. It's called having a brain. It's called using your intelligence and being a smart person. And that's what I did. I overcame this denial pattern that you are suffering from. The first step is admitting you have a problem. And your denial is a problem because your denial perpetuates harmful norms that attack children. So anyways, you haven't given me a single quality study agreeing with you. So you haven't shown any science supporting your side. I mean, if you watch the other two videos, go watch the other two videos, okay? I provide tons of resources. I have images of the histology studies. I have images of the Meissner corpuscles in the frenulum. I have tons of studies. The only really legit histology study ever done on the human prepuce using modern techniques was Taylor, Colden, Lockwood. The only one. Put that through your brain. Why would there be so few histology studies on the human prepuce? Because all of the people that would be studying it don't have one. They have a ego pattern denial syndrome like this guy. That's why we don't have more studies and more histology, because we don't want to know the truth, because men like this can't handle the truth. This is a doctor who went through a bachelor's degree and then 4 years of medical training and then 4 years of residency. I mean, denying that there's a correlation between nerves and sensory input. But anyways, you haven't given me a single study. They're just repeating this. He just repeats the same thing over and over. The burden of proof is on them. Yes, I provided multiple systemic reviews that agreed with me. You can't provide one high-quality study. The multiple systemic reviews that he's talking about are Brian Morris, which is what we're really going to get into today. So stick around, because that's where it's going to get interesting. But the multiple systemic reviews, there's not one thing that he didn't provide to me that was like a legit scientist. Okay, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, okay. Nerves don't necessarily contribute to sensation. My ocular motor nerve plays no role in sensation. So yes, I mean, it's just like, it's like, it's using like little twists of words to make him feel like he won something. I mean, this is like a childish playground level one-up kind of ish thing, when in reality, like, he is so far beneath me and so lacking in awareness and education. It's crazy. Like, it's mind-boggling. But hey, it is what it is. So let's see. Nerves don't necessarily contribute to sensation. Okay, so now he gets into, he even knows the guy's middle name. Brian James Morris. Being a pedophile has as much evidence as your claims do. None, but go off, sis. Well, I already told you I was going to make a video about this, and I told you I was going to provide my evidence, and I got tons of it. Like, tons of it. So, strap your boots on, strap your foreskin on, you're about to learn something. I mean, lying is pure honesty. That would make sense why you don't believe in science. I mean, science would prove that genitally mutilating children is harmful. There is nothing in science that proves that the genital mutilation of anyone has any benefits whatsoever. There's no evidence that cutting off the main sensory tissue of anybody's genitals does not have effect on their sensation. That's a pure pseudoscience cope strategy of denial, and that has no bearing whatsoever on science. Reality is what is reflected by well-made scientific studies. Like all the ones that disprove your claims, that is why the scientific consensus disagrees with you. I never claimed there was no histological correlation. It's just that correlation doesn't mean causation. I mean, structure and function does have an effect on function. I mean, okay, let's just move on. There's no evidence that Brian James Morris is a pedophile. All you know is how to do is lie, isn't it? What is reflected by well-made scientific studies, like all the ones that disprove your claims, is why scientific consensus disagrees with you. He has one meta-analysis from a pedophile that you're going to find out how sick this man is today. It's just he repeats the same boring stuff. It's unfathomably stupid and boring. Okay, so I'm going to read to you this. This is the research he sent to me. This is Brian J. Morris. Does male circumcision affect sexual function, sensitivity, or sensation? A systemic quack review. Circumcision is commonly carried out worldwide for reasons of health, medical need, aesthetic, tradition, or religion. Whether circumcision impairs or improves medical sexual function or pleasure is controversial. This study aims to conduct a systemic review of the scientific literature. Then it goes, conclusion. The highest quality studies suggest that medical male circumcision has no adverse effect on sexual function, sensitivity, sexual sensation, or satisfaction. Morris, B.J., and Krieger, G.N. Okay, so that's the claim that that this quack is basically... all of his denial depends on this. Like, this is his whole thing. So his whole thing depends on what is basically a circumfetish pedophile. That's what his whole shtick, his whole spiel, his whole denial pattern. And let's get into who this man is, Brian J. Morris. Okay, so this is from Brian Morris's website, circinfo.net. Circumcision of males is a very popular procedure. The purpose of this website is to provide a balanced, up-to-date, evidence-based review of scientific studies on male circumcision that have been published mainly in reputable international medical and scientific journals as a formal, critical referencing process by experts in the field. Sounds so wonderful. The information provided herein is the most sensitive and accurate in the world. Listed are over 1,000 references. Most can be found by the reader in any medical library or internet referencing services such as PubMed. The message they convey is quite clear and have helped in formation of affirmative circumcision statements by major international and national organizations such as American Academy of Pediatrics, the quacks at WHO, UNAIDS, who self-contradict themselves, and the CDC, and Prevention and Circumcision Academy Australia over recent years. By the way, the rest of the international world is completely against this. The intention of the present overall overview to provide an easily accessible, reliable, balanced information that should be assistance to parents, medical quack professionals, scholars, as well as men and their sexual partners. The author is a professor emeritus in the medical facility of the University of Sydney. He has over 46 years of scientific research experience and more than 380 research publications, including over 87 on circumcision, mostly in peer-reviewed international journals. As such, he is often invited by journals, book publishers, professional organizations, and the news media for his comments or other contributions.
Inspiring hatred.
Get heaps of hate mail.
And according to new research, saving lives.
Circumcision should be made compulsory. The evidence is so strong that the government and health authorities can no longer ignore it. Millions of lives would be saved by universal circumcision. The benefits exceed the risks by 100 to 1. 1 in 3 males, as a conservative estimate, will get a medical problem. Many will die if they're not circumcised. And I'm being very serious about this.
Sydney University professor Brian Morris is one of the leading advocates for circumcision. He's also one of the most hated men in Australia. What does hell tomorrow mean?
Well, who knows and who cares, basically. Circumcision must be advocated for reducing AIDS and the impact on cervical cancer and other conditions in women. For sure, there will be people who don't want it done, just as there are opponents of vaccination. Benefits are so incredibly vast that any parent not wanting their child circumcised really needs good talking to.
Well, it's barbaric, and it's a mutilation, and it should stop. No, I mean, healthy children don't need operations. Can you think about where a healthy child should be subjected to an operation for a fear of a disease? And how's he drinking?
Paediatric health consultant Dr. George Williams says circumcision is no different to any operation. It always carries risk.
Every year, at least one baby gets admitted to our children's hospital in Sydney with a major complication. Either the head of the penis has been damaged or a part of the penis has been damaged, and the baby's admitted for reconstructive surgery.
Australian public hospitals no longer offer routine circumcision, leaving parents to find doctors willing to do it.
Because parents have been encouraged not to circumcise their kids, what we're now seeing is a big rise in the number of uncircumcised males entering the sexually active community. Coupled with that, we're seeing a rise in all sorts of sexually transmitted infections and diseases. HIV being the one that grabs the headlines because it infects through the foreskin. Men have got a much higher risk.
All of these benefits that those that believe in circumcision list, things like AIDS, urinary tract infection, penile cancer, cervical cancer in their partners, all of those things aren't worth preventing?
Well, it's quackery. I mean, if you decide today that you don't want to have a nose because you fear that you're going to get cancer of the nose because you're exposed to sunlight, you're going to remove your nose. There are safer options to prevent disease, not surgery. Safe sexual practices. Why can't we teach that?
If you want to do something in the best interest of your child, you will certainly have him circumcised.
This is from the Nordic Association of Clinical Sexology. Emeritus Professor Brian Morris, who we never get tired of repeating, is not a medical doctor, a sexologist, an epidemiologist, a pediatrician, a urologist, or anything similar, but a molecular biologist and a circumcision enthusiast, one who apparently manages to convince naive or biased reporters every few months. The penile foreskin is a natural and integral part of the normal male genitalia. The foreskin has a number of important protective and sexual functions. It protects the penile glands against trauma and contributes to the natural functioning of the penis during sexual activities. Ancient historical accounts and recent scientific evidence leave little doubt that during sexual activity, the foreskin is a functional and highly sensitive erogenous structure capable of providing pleasure to its owner and his potential partners. These are people with the tissue. They're in Nordic. As clinical sexologists, we are concerned about the human rights aspect associated with the practice of non-therapeutic circumcision of young boys. To cut off the penile foreskin in a boy with normal, healthy genitalia deprives him of his right to grow up and make his own informed decisions. Unless there are compelling medical reasons to operate before a boy reaches the age and a level of maturity at which he is capable of providing informed consent, the decision to alter the appearance, sensitivity, and functionality of the penis should be left to its owner, thus upholding his fundamental rights to protection and body integrity. Every person's right to body integrity go hand in hand with his or her sexual autonomy. So there's a huge number of people that are aware of this Brian Moore's character and are knowledgeable of his quackery. Now we're going to get into the details. Circumgate, U.S. circumfetish czar finally caught red-handed. Intactivist groups have been trying to warn British authorities about this man and his activity, but it seemed like this was a hot potato they wanted nothing of. And now it looks like our prayers have been answered. According to this source, it looks like Vernon Quaintance has finally been caught in his tracks. Who is Vernon Quaintance? And why is this event significant? To all intactivists in the know, Vernon Quaintance is a circumcision fetish extraordinaire. The Gilgal Society is the worldwide Mambla. If you know what NAMBLA is, that's a organization of circumcision fetishism. And Vernon Quaintance was in the head. Aside from heading the Gilgal Society, Vernon Quaintance was also a moderator at Circ List, another social group for circumcision enthusiasts, which has been around since the dawn of the internet, as well as a member of the Acorn Society, another group of exactly the same nature. He was also a writer of erotic stories that include graphic descriptions of circumcising young boys while others masturbate. This following is a piece of poetry written by Vernon Quaintance himself. Decision. Some people claim that foreskins are fun and keep the muzzle on the gun, but many doctors do declare it's healthier with the glands laid bare. So mom and dad, we say to you, you must decide what's best to do. Your son will benefit throughout his life, as incidentally will his wife. If you make the choice, it's always wise, and do decide to circumcise. Caught red-handed. According to the source, police raided Quaintance' home on April 11th of last year. I think this was 2012. After receiving a tip-off, movies seized include graphic footage of child abuse, which ranked in the second highest level of severity. Of the 5 tapes seized, 3 were found to contain indecent images. They comprised a total of 7 to 9 hours. The children were estimated to be between 11 and 16 years old. According to the therapist, Quaintance seems to have been celibate his whole life and that he gained no sexual gratification of any time from the videotapes, something the judges have a hard time believing, considering the fact that he kept the videotapes found in his possession until today. Intactivists have known this man's antics for years, and we were relieved to finally hear he's finally been caught in his tracks. You can already guess what's on these videotapes. What is the Gilgal Society? There are those on the internet who have a sexual fixation for the circumcised penis and or derive sexual gratification from the act of circumcision itself. Some call them circumfetishes. They gather in groups to discuss erotic stimulation they experience by watching other males being circumcised, swap erotic fiction, and trade videotapes of actual circumcision, and justify circumcision and their enthusiasm by wrapping it up in pseudo-scientific jargon. Gilgal Society is one such group based in the UK. Other circumfetishes groups exist, such as Circ List, Acorn Society, and the Cutting Club, and they openly admit to morbid fascination with circumcision to the point of sadomasochist fetish. These groups advertise that doctors are among their members. Furthermore, there are anecdote accounts of doctors becoming sexually aroused when circumcising boys. Circumcision certainly provides an opportunity not only to handle boys' penises without the condemnation that a sexual assault, in the case that phrase is normally used, would attract, but also the opportunity to exercise power over another human being and alter their penis and control it and the boy's future sexual life. The plot thickens. Vernon Quaintance is only the beginning. It ought to concern people that many prominent circumcision experts are members of or closely associated with the Gilgal Society and other circumfetish groups. It ought to concern people that groups such as the Gilgal Society and Circ List are being referred to as respectable authorities on circumcision. Very recently, the New York Times actually dared to cite Circ List as an actual resource on circumcision. Some circumcision experts would like their audience to believe they are objective, impartial, and or dispassionate authorities on the manner of circumcision, when in fact they are passionate circumcision enthusiasts. Quite a few are members of circumfetish groups such as mentioned above. And there's more. Lots more. It is relieving to hear that a known circumfetishist is finally being exposed for the pervert that he really is. But it barely scratches the surface. There's more. Lots more. The floodgates, the greatest medical hoax of all time, are beginning to collapse. Look at the pamphlets put out Look at the pamphlets put out by Brian Morris, Viz. Gilgal Society. 2 such publications can be seen here and here. I don't have those images. You'll find the names of many prominent circumcision researchers and people who claim to be experts on circumcision. Bertrand Alvert, who did the HIV quackery studies in Uganda. Robert Bailey and Dan Halperin, who is responsible for the UTI quackery, appeared as authors. These are some of the most prominent men who are flooding the medical literature with studies that say circumcision reduces HIV transmission as well as other diseases. Thomas Wiswell, author of the debunked circumcision UTI research, has long been dismissed by authorities such as the AAP, appears as an author on one of Morris's and Gilgal's pamphlets. So does Edward Schoen, and so does Jake Waskett. Dan Halpern has corresponded with Circlist, but apparently so has Edgar Solon. Daniel Halperin has actually recommended Circlist as well as Brian Morris's websites as authorities on circumcision. And very recently, Brian Morris published another pro-circumcision paper where Jake Waskett, Robert Bailey, Daniel Halperin, and Thomas Wiswell all appear simultaneously. This is like the heads of the circumfetish sicko society. An earlier such paper can be seen here, and although Robert Bailey does not appear in this one, it mentioned Jake Waskett. These are the people responsible for all the recent circumcision, quote-unquote, research. These are the people shaping the WHO's opinion. These are the people to whom medical outlets look as experts. These are the people to whom others call as authorities on the subject. These are the people helping shape policy in California and Colorado. Can they be trusted to provide impartial, dispassionate, and unbiased information? This is about public health. Or is public health and research a front for something darker and more sinister? How far does this rabbit hole go? The world is about to find out. Disclaimer, some may argue that I'm engaging in ad hominems. However, pointing out conflicts of interest is not an ad hominem. The following is a expert from Wikipedia's entry on an ad hominem. Conflict of interest where a course seeks to convince by a claim of authority or personal observation, identification of conflicts or interests are not ad hominem. It is generally well accepted that authority needs to be objective and impartial, and that an audience can only evaluate information from a source they know about conflicts of interest that may affect the objectivity of the source. Identification of a conflict of interest is appropriate, and concealment of a conflict of interest is a problem, which is what these doctors do. They never admit that they have these really strange, sick obsessions. It should be noted that Brian Morris's website links to 8 circumfetish websites and 7 websites that sell devices to perform circumcision surgery on your own. He is a member of the Gilgal Society, a group that publishes circumcision pornography, including circumcision fan fiction stories of children being given wine and asked to masturbate while being circumcised. Okay, so if that wasn't enough for you, which it should have been, but if it wasn't enough, I'm going to read to you a very, very small, as politically correct version of a article directly linked from Brian Morris's website, okay? Directly linked from his website, okay? And it's called The Doctor and Darren. This is a circumfetish, pedophile, incestuous smut article. So below are experts from an incestuous, circumfetish smut article directly linked from Brian Morris's website titled The Doctor and Darren, which I researched this in 2017. Okay? Cutting a baby is okay, but the real thrill is doing it for an adolescent. And because there are fewer babies done, it means there are more teenagers to play around with, and that is really nice. Part of the interest is persuading their parents. I tell them how much cleaner and how much better the penis looks. I warn them about dirt behind the tight foreskin and penile cancer. I talk about irritants and ulcers and all the other medical reasons. But what I don't say is that they are all so much nonsense. Doctors, and especially me, we circumcise because we enjoy it. And so, since I left the Army, I've had the privilege and pleasure of taking my scalpel to some 25 or 30 healthy teenagers' foreskins. I read in an article in an American magazine, it was about some of the customs of the Arabs and the slaves they took from the African tribes. Now, I don't know how true it all was, but it was obviously that the writer was turned on by the idea of primitive circumcision, as was I. I also began to wonder what it would be like to own slaves. Looking at the boy himself, he certainly seemed to have developed very nicely indeed. He was well muscled for a teenager, compact and trimmed, short blonde hair, and very fair blank in his trousers. He wasn't going to say the word, nor was I, but I could tell. We were both savoring the same idea. Then I looked at Darren. I wondered if he knew, too. Was that fear in his eyes, or was it interest? Or maybe it was both. The sick thing is that these weirdos, they often believe that their victims wanted it. As you can see, the framing of this horrific article. And I did not get into the part where they all have this experience together, and there's a at the end where all of them have this wonderful together experience with this boy being brutally mutilated, and this is the truth behind all these weirdos. This is a strange, really sick part of the human mind, and it's absolutely horrendous that we actually have human beings that are this disturbed, this disgusting, that they get off on the torture and abuse of helpless children and young boys. It's mind-boggling to me, and so you be the judge of this. No evidence, huh? No evidence, right? Like the no evidence I provided, the numerous histologies, the histology studies, the neurology testing, the common sense, the facts, that mean nothing to this quack. And the lies are just so readily apparent. They're so overt. They don't even try to like cover them up. They don't try to be slick about them. They just straight bold-faced lie. And they repeat the lies over and over and over again until you just get worn down with stupidity. So in conclusion, as you can see, the words are pretty. The official looking documents, the PubMed, the literature, the meta-studies, the analyses of all these men. It's just a system of pedophilia that is covered for by medical jargon that's absolutely pseudoscience. It's not even slightly convincing. If you read some of these articles by this quack, you will see that they are just so lacking in evidence. First off, this guy has no images of the prepuce with the lacking Meissner corpuscles. Show me the study that shows there's no Meissner corpuscles. Show me that, right? Like, I have a study, it's kind of sad. Like, all my childhood things just kind of, Boy Scouts, all these wonderful things I thought that were like for kids or wonderful, like teachers, like principals in schools, like these places, even like, things like CPS, Child Protective Services, and principals, schools, all these types of things. These places attract the weirdos, the sickos, because that's where they could access children. This is like the same type of thing, except for doctors. And so really disgusting people will get into becoming doctors just so they can do this to children. And there is no benefits. It's all harm. And you can lie all you want, but this is the most sensitive, pleasurable part of our genitalia, and removing it definitely affects sexual function and sensation. I did make a promise in this video to share a bunch of stories of men that have been circumcised as adults, so they know both experiences. And this video got a little long, so I decided to make it another video. So we're gonna have 4 videos replying to this doctor, and make sure you watch out for the next one. The next one's going to be good because we're going to actually talk about the men who have actually experienced both sides of this, and we're going to put all this quackery to rest. Thank you very much for listening.